Jake Turner had seen his fair share of trouble in his 30 years as a sheriff, so when he decided to retire and buy a house in the peaceful suburb of Willow Creek, he thought he'd left all that behind. The neighborhood was picture-perfect, tree-lined, streets, manicured lawns, and that heavy air of suburban quiet. Exactly what Jake wanted. But peace, as it turned out, was the last thing waiting for him. His new house was solid, built on a generous lot that extended to a small patch of woodland. Beyond the backyard, Jake liked the space, room enough for his old pickup and a flagpole he planned to erect proudly by the driveway. Nothing fancy, just a symbol of his service and his country. What he didn't expect was the immediate hostility. Barely a week after moving in, a thick envelope slid through his mail slot. Jake didn't recognize the sender at first, but the embossed letters Willow Creek HOA caught his eye immediately. He grabbed the letter and broke the seal. Inside, typed in cold, formal language, was a sharply worded notice. "Dear Mr. Turner, it has come to the board's attention that you have erected a flagpole on your property without prior approval. This violates Article 7, Section 3 of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association regulations, which strictly governs exterior modifications. You are hereby instructed to remove the flagpole within 7 days or face penalties, including fines and possible legal action." Jake's lips curled into a slow smile. The letter was aggressive, no doubt meant to intimidate a newcomer into submission. But Jake wasn't just any homeowner. The flagpole was already halfway up, and the stars and stripes fluttered gently in the early morning breeze. To him, it was a symbol of pride, of a lifetime protecting his country and community. He folded the letter carefully, setting it on the kitchen counter. Outside, the neighborhood looked innocent enough. Kids played quietly on the sidewalks. Neighbors waved politely. But Jake sensed the undercurrent, a strict, watchful eye, and a woman behind it all named Karen. His first encounter with Karen came 2 days later. She appeared on his doorstep unannounced, clipboard in hand, dressed in the sharp-pressed attire of an HOA president on a mission. Her sharp eyes scanned Jake up and down as if appraising a threat. "Mr. Turner," she began crisply, "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Willow Creek HOA. We need to talk about your flagpole." Her voice was firm, almost icy. Jake extended his hand, but Karen ignored it, launching straight into the rules she was sworn to enforce. "Our community has standards. We maintain uniformity. That flagpole is not in compliance." Jake listened quietly, then leaned on the porch railing. "Karen, I respect the neighborhood, but I'm also the sheriff of this county. I know about rights and laws, and I know my property. That flagpole isn't coming down without a serious discussion." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about you being sheriff, Mr. Turner. This is about the community and its rules." Jake nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure those rules are fair, because I plan on staying here, and I don't take kindly to threats or ultimatums." She gave him a tight smile and turned to leave. "You'll hear from us soon." As the door clicked shut behind her, Jake felt the tension settle, thick in the air. This was more than a petty dispute. Karen's pushback wasn't just about a flagpole. It was about control. And Jake, with his quiet strength and knowledge of the law, was about to shake up the neighborhood's carefully balanced order. That evening, Jake stood outside, staring at the flag snapping proudly against the twilight sky. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning of a battle that would test more than just neighborhood rules. It would test wills, power, and the truth about who really owned the land beneath their feet. 3 days passed. Jake spent them minding his business, mowing his lawn, organizing the tools in his garage, and setting up solar-powered cameras around the property line. He didn't trust threats, veiled or otherwise, especially not from someone like Karen. On the 4th morning, just as the sun cast a golden hue over the dew-covered grass, he found another letter in his mailbox. This one was thicker, Inside was a formal second violation notice with a printed fine of $250 for non-compliance, a list of escalating penalties, and a summons to appear at the next HOA board meeting. Mandatory attendance. Jake chuckled. Under his breath. Mandatory. Right. Later that afternoon, he typed a response, printed it out, and walked over to the HOA drop box in front of the clubhouse. His letter was simple, but precise. To whom it may concern, as the legal property owner and acting sheriff of Montgomery County, I am fully aware of my rights under both local and federal property laws. The placement of a flagpole is protected under state statute, and any HOA guidelines that attempt to override these rights may be subject to legal review. I respectfully decline your fine and will gladly attend your board meeting to ensure that all parties understand the law clearly. He signed it with a bold flourish and slipped it into the box, noting the blinking security camera above. That night, Jake's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Watch your back, Sheriff. Some of us like order." He didn't reply. Instead, he poured himself a glass of iced tea and stood on the porch, eyes scanning the quiet street. Lights glowed softly from the homes lining the block. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. The day of the meeting arrived with thick clouds hanging over Willow Creek. Inside the HOA clubhouse, the air was cold, artificially chilled, and humming with tension. Jake walked in wearing a pressed shirt, badge on his belt, and a calm, unreadable expression. Karen sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by 4 board members. Rows of folding chairs held residents, many whispering as Jake entered. A few looked curious, a few looked scared, most looked tired, like people used to being ruled rather than heard. Karen cleared her throat. "Mr. Turner," she said crisply, "we're here to address your repeated violations of our community's guidelines. We'll give you 3 minutes to speak." Jake stepped up to the podium, scanned the crowd, and then looked directly at Karen. "Thank you, Madam President," he began, voice calm. "First, let me remind everyone here, HOA rules don't override state or federal law. Under Florida Statute 720-304, homeowners have the right to display the U.S. flag on their property. That's not a suggestion. That's law." Karen stiffened, but didn't interrupt. Jake continued. "Second, my deed is unique. My property includes a parcel of land that predates this HOA's formation. That makes enforcement of certain HOA regulations on my property legally unenforceable. I've already contacted my attorney, but I came here tonight not to threaten anyone. I came to make things clear." A long silence followed. Then someone in the back muttered, "He's got a point." Another voice added, "Wait, his land predates the HOA?" Karen's lips thinned. "You may think you're above the rules, Sheriff Turner, but this board, I don't think I'm above anything," Jake said, cutting her off gently. "But I know where I stand, and I don't bluff." The room held its breath. Karen leaned back, her eyes icy. Meeting adjourned. Jake turned and left without another word. As he stepped into the fading evening light, he felt the winds shift. The neighborhood wasn't quite the same, and Karen was just getting started. It started small, so small it could have been coincidence. The next morning, Jake noticed a long, jagged scratch across the side of his truck. It hadn't been there the night before. He bent down, examined it, and found tiny flecks of red paint. Just enough to know it hadn't been from a branch or a wayward shopping cart. He checked the footage from his security cameras. One lens, the one aimed at the driveway, was mysteriously dead, blacked out sometime during the night. Jake leaned back in his chair, narrowed his eyes, and muttered, "So it begins." He didn't report it. Not yet. He knew how to play the long game. Instead, he replaced the camera and doubled the memory cards. Then he sat on the porch, sipping coffee, watching. A black SUV passed by, slowly. The driver didn't wave. That afternoon, Mrs. Loring from across the street brought over a plate of cookies. She was shaking slightly as she handed them over. "I just wanted to say thank you for standing up at the meeting. Not many of us would have dared," she said, voice low. "You're not the only one Karen's tried to bully." Jake gave her a warm nod. "Appreciate it. Anything I should know?" Mrs. Loring hesitated. "Just watch your back, Sheriff. Karen doesn't like losing control, and some folks here are too scared to speak up." As if to punctuate her warning, the next day, Jake woke up to find his trash cans overturned, their contents spread deliberately across his lawn. Sprinkler heads along his walkway had been snapped. His welcome mat had been soaked in something foul-smelling, but still, no cameras caught anything. Whoever was doing it knew exactly where the blind spots were. That afternoon, a letter arrived. No envelope, just a single sheet of paper, typed in bold, "Comply or move. This is your last warning." Jake read it twice, then set it down. His face didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He walked out to the edge of his property, crossed into the strip of woodland that marked the end of his parcel, and stepped onto an old concrete pad, half buried beneath leaves and roots. He knelt, brushed the debris aside, and uncovered a rusted metal marker. There it was, Parcel A, Turner Trust, 1971. Pre-HOA, pre-everything. Jake stood up slowly. They didn't know what he really owned. They didn't understand the land beneath their houses once belonged to someone who left it to him. And now, he realized, they were trying to force him out before they found out. That evening, he stood by. The flagpole, the wind tugging gently at the stars and stripes. A shadow moved across the street. He turned but saw nothing. Still, he felt it. Watched. Hunted. He stepped inside, bolted the door, and opened a small locked cabinet beside his desk. Inside sat a leather-bound folder of old land deeds, notarized copies, and a sealed envelope addressed to be opened in the event of conflict with Willow Creek HOA. Jake stared at it for a long moment, then shut the cabinet again. Not yet. He poured himself a drink, sat back, and whispered, "Let's see how far you're willing to take this, Karen." Outside, in the stillness of the neighborhood, motion-sensitive lights flickered on. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. But they weren't the only ones preparing for a fight. Jake didn't flinch when the second threatening note appeared. "This one was taped to his back door. We warned you. Take it down, or we'll make you." He peeled it off, glanced around the backyard calmly, and slid the note into a folder labeled Evidence. His days of warning people were over. It was time for the gloves to come off. He unlocked the cabinet again. Inside, along with the old deed records and sealed envelope, was a second file, one he'd kept tucked away even from most of the county office. It was a copy of the original land charter from 1971, signed by the last private owner of the property and notarized by the state. The kicker? It didn't just include Jake's land. It included a buried clause most of Willow Creek didn't know existed, one that granted Jake easement rights and legal jurisdiction over a narrow tract that ran through the neighborhood like a vein. Essentially, while Karen and the HOA had been operating under modern covenants and bylaws, Jake's property rights were rooted in a grandfather clause that gave him senior authority that trumped HOA policy in several key areas. Jake grinned as he reread the clause. In the event of a dispute with future developments or associations, Parcel A retains independent legal governance so long as the title holder is active law enforcement within the county. He was the law, and the land knew it. Later that day, Jake paid a quiet visit to the county recorder's office. He requested certified copies of the deed and the grandfather clause. "Making enemies again, Sheriff?" the clerk joked. Jake smirked. "They started it. I'm just finishing it." Armed with documents and his badge, he returned home. But before he could even step onto his porch, he saw it, the flagpole, gone, uprooted, torn from its base. A rough patch of soil and shattered concrete was all that remained. Jake froze. The wind was still. Birds were silent. For a moment, his expression didn't change. Just a slow, steady burn behind his eyes. Then he turned and walked straight to his garage. He opened a tool chest, pulled out a camera memory card, and slotted it into his laptop. This one was from a backup unit he'd mounted behind a tree in the woods, one no one knew about. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. At 3:13 a.m., two figures in hoodies crept across the lawn. One of them carried a shovel. The other held bolt cutters. They moved quickly like they'd done this before. Jake paused the video and zoomed in. Even in the low light, he recognized the stance of the taller figure, the stiff posture, the haughty stride. Karen. No mistake, she had crossed the line, and Jake now had proof. That evening, he made one more stop, down to the county sheriff's office, where he still held honorary status and access to certain privileges. He handed the footage to Deputy Carson, a young officer he'd trained years ago. Carson's eyes widened. "You want to press charges?" Jake gave a grim smile. "Not yet. I want her rattled first." He left the office with a folder under his arm and a plan forming in his mind. Karen had waged war in the shadows. Jake? He'd fight in the daylight. And the first step? Unveiling just how much power he really had. The next HOA meeting was packed, more than usual. Word had gotten around that something big was brewing. Something involving Sheriff Jake Turner, that new flagpole drama, and possibly Karen. People stood in clusters near the entrance of the clubhouse, whispering. Even those who usually kept to themselves had shown up. Curious, tense, hungry for something to shatter the routine. Jake arrived 10 minutes early. He wore a plain button-up, badge clipped neatly to his belt, and carried a weathered leather folder under one arm. When he walked in, the room quieted. Karen, already seated at the front, gave him a sour, thin-lipped smile. "Sheriff Turner," she greeted. "Glad you could join us." "Again." "I wouldn't miss it," Jake said calmly, taking a seat in the front row. He didn't flinch when Karen motioned for the meeting to begin. "As always," she began, "we thank everyone for attending. Let's proceed to agenda item number 2, enforcement of aesthetic compliance and recent violations, namely, the unauthorized flagpole installation on Parcel A." Jake stood slowly. "Before you continue, I have something for the record." He opened the leather folder and held up a sheaf of documents. "This," he said, "is the original deed to Parcel A, my property. It predates this HOA. It includes a grandfather clause which legally exempts my land from your aesthetic and structural restrictions." He handed the top copy to a stunned board member. "It also grants me limited jurisdiction over the original right-of-way corridor through Willow Creek, a clause triggered when the landholder is an active member of county law enforcement." Karen scoffed. "This is absurd. Those documents are outdated, irrelevant. We've had control of this neighborhood for years." Jake's voice sharpened. "Control doesn't equal authority. This land isn't under your rule. And the destruction of my flagpole? That wasn't just a violation, it was a criminal act." He reached into the folder again and pulled out several still images. He laid them gently on the table one by one, grainy shots, but unmistakable. Karen, shovel in hand. Karen crouching at the base of the pole. Karen yanking the bolts loose as another figure stood lookout. Gasps filled the room. Karen froze. Jake let the silence stretch. Then, "I've already turned this over to the sheriff's department. Destruction of private property, trespassing, possible conspiracy, but I haven't pressed charges yet." "You're bluffing," Karen hissed. Jake didn't smile. He didn't need to. Deputy Carson entered from the back of the room, crisp uniform catching the light. He walked calmly to Jake's side, gave Karen a polite nod, and said, "Not bluffing. We've reviewed the footage. The sheriff here gave you more courtesy than most would." The room was in stunned silence. Then a hand raised in the crowd. Mrs. Loring. Her voice was soft but firm. "I moved to suspend Karen from the board pending." "An investigation?" Someone else echoed. "Seconded." Karen's eyes widened. "You can't do this. I built this HOA. You need me." But no one moved to stop it. Jake leaned close. "You forgot the most important rule of power, Karen. It doesn't last when it's built on fear." She stormed out moments later, red-faced, her composure cracking at last. The rest of the meeting was quiet, too quiet. The room had shifted. The spell had broken. Outside, Jake stood beneath the stars where his flag once flew. He looked up, hands in his pockets, knowing full well this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't finished, and he still hadn't played his final card. 3 days after the meeting, Jake's front yard was torched. Not the whole thing, just enough. A 5-foot-wide circle of blackened grass, scorched earth still smoking faintly in the morning sun. Someone had poured accelerant, ignited it, and vanished into the night without triggering any alarms. Jake stood over the charred ring, jaw clenched. He had expected backlash, but this was escalation. Not intimidation, declaration. The new flagpole base had been ripped out again. Only the bolts remained, twisted and black. Deputy Carson arrived 15 minutes later. "Want to file an official report this time?" Jake nodded grimly. "Yup, arson and destruction of property. I'm done playing nice." Carson crouched by the burn mark. "They're getting sloppy. We'll find them." Jake didn't respond. His eyes were scanning the tree line across the road. There, tucked. Between the brush, he spotted something glinting. He walked over and found it. A cheap motion-activated wildlife camera, camouflaged but old. Karen's kind of tech. He popped the SD card, slid it into his pocket. Back inside, he reviewed the footage. Sure enough, 2:42 a.m., a shadowy figure in a hoodie and gloves. Smaller build this time. Different accomplice? The figure poured something from a metal can, lit a rag, and dashed back into the dark. No license plate, no face. But the movement, the hurried gait, slight limp on the left side, Jake recognized it. Martin Greaves, Karen's nephew, former security guard, fired from the city job after a steroid scandal. He still lived 2 streets down, off the books, but still nearby. Jake printed a still frame from the video. This time, he didn't go to the sheriff's department. He went to Martin's door. Martin answered half asleep, blinking under the midday sun. When he saw Jake, he tensed. "We need to talk," Jake said flatly. "I don't know what you think you—" Jake held up the photo. "Recognize this?" Martin's face went pale. "You're not going to jail today," Jake continued. "But if I ever see you near my property again, if one more thing catches fire, breaks, or disappears, I will bury you in court. And trust me, you won't even get the courtesy of a warning next time." Martin swallowed hard. "She said you were bluffing, that the land stuff didn't mean anything." Jake stepped closer. "She's lying to you, just like she's been lying to everyone. Don't let her drag you down with her." He left Martin standing in his doorway, trembling. But Jake knew Karen wouldn't stop. Not now. Not when her control had been ripped away in front of the entire community. She was unraveling, and people like her got dangerous when they lost their grip. That night, Jake locked every door, reinforced the garage, and placed wireless cams along the entire perimeter, linked straight to a cloud server and a burner laptop hidden in a safe. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was building a case. But then came the real twist. The next morning, envelope was slid under his door. No note, no return address. Inside were copies of his property documents, his original deed, legal exemptions, and a small sticky note in Karen's distinct handwriting. These don't protect you anymore. The county made a mistake. You'll see. Jake stared at the note, heart pounding. She couldn't actually overturn the deed. Could she? Unless she found something hidden in the original land charter. A loophole, or worse, a forged correction already filed. Jake stepped back, mind racing. Karen wasn't trying to fight him on his land anymore, she was trying to erase it. Jake knew Karen wasn't bluffing. The sticky note wasn't just a taunt, it was a threat dressed in confidence. If she had the nerve to claim the county made a mistake, that meant she was preparing something big, something official, something that could actually shift the power. So Jake played the only hand she didn't know he had, misdirection. He made no move for days, no calls to the HOA, no visit to the county clerk. He let Karen believe she'd scared him off. He even let his lawn grow slightly longer than usual, which in Willow Creek might as well have been waving a white flag. But behind the scenes, Jake was moving like a general preparing for war. He visited a retired land use attorney named June Marks, an old friend of his father's, who now spent her time restoring colonial case law for fun. Karen's trying to rewrite the deed history? June asked, flipping through the documents. She'd need a falsified easement correction, a forged signature, and a backdated seal. That's a felony cocktail, Jake nodded. She's desperate. She's trying to claw back control any way she can. June smiled. Then let's make her think she already has. Together, they drafted a revised parcel addendum, completely legal, but laced with fine print booby traps. The new document looked like a surrender, Jake allegedly transferring his authority to HOA jurisdiction under limited conditions, but hidden deep in the second addendum clause was a clause of reversion. If the HOA initiated any enforcement, action based on the addendum within 30 days, all rights reverted back to Jake permanently. Ironclad, signed and sealed. He made one more stop before baiting the hook. The county archives. Jake had befriended a tech-savvy archivist named Leo during his years in uniform. Leo had a knack for sniffing out metadata manipulation in legal files. When Jake handed over the sticky note and asked for a deep dive into any recent amendments to Parcel A, Leo raised an eyebrow. Looking for forgeries? Jake nodded. Or someone trying to bury an original record? Leo grinned. You came to the right nerd. Back at home, Jake printed out the revised addendum and, with deliberate casualness, dropped it into the HOA drop box. Just enough bait to get Karen salivating. He didn't wait long. 2 nights later, his hidden camera caught her again, this time alone, opening his mailbox, removing a decoy letter, and snapping photos of documents she wasn't supposed to have. She was desperate, sloppy, and falling straight into the legal bear trap he'd built. 3 days after that, he received a formal letter from the HOA. Effective immediately, due to the revised addendum filed by the homeowner, Parcel A shall fall. Under HOA aesthetic jurisdiction, enforcement measures will be resumed. Jake smiled. Gotcha. Within the hour, he had copies of the footage, the signed decoy addendum, and the HOA's enforcement letter hand-delivered to Deputy Carson and June Marks. Karen had just triggered the reversion clause with her own greed. But the cherry on top? Leo called later that day, voice triumphant. She tried to backdate a land use override at the archives, used a fake notary seal from 2003. We traced the digital signature to her nephew's laptop. Jake sat back, the weight lifting from his shoulders. It's over, Leo said. No, Jake replied. It's about to be. Because now, Jake wasn't just defending his land. He was going to bury Karen with her own arrogance, and he still had one final reveal no one, not even Karen, saw coming. The community hall was packed again. Not because of a regular HOA meeting, but because of the emergency hearing called by Jake Turner himself. Word had spread fast. The sheriff was bringing evidence, real evidence, about forged documents, HOA corruption, and the queen of control, herself. Karen. Even those who had once feared her, who had bowed to her tyranny for years, now showed up hoping she'd fall hard. Karen sat at the front table, composed but twitchy. Her nephew Martin lingered in the back, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact with Jake. Jake stood tall and calm in front of the projector screen as Deputy Carson wheeled in a cart stacked with files and a laptop. "I appreciate you all coming," Jake began, "especially since this isn't your usual meeting. But this isn't a usual problem. It's bigger than flagpoles or lawn lengths." He clicked the remote. The projector flicked on. Freeze frames from his surveillance footage appeared. Karen opening his mailbox, photographing documents, and leaving behind a fake letter. Whispers erupted in the crowd. "Let's start here," Jake said. "Tampering with mail, federal crime. That's count 1. Click. Another image, the forged notary seal, blown up and dated. Next, forgery of county documents. This wasn't just carelessness. This was fraud committed to strip land ownership rights and manipulate HOA jurisdiction. That's count 2. He turned to the audience, eyes sweeping the stunned faces. Karen filed a fake deed amendment. She used her nephew's device to backdate it and uploaded it to the county server, trying to make it look legitimate. But digital fingerprints don't lie. Gasps. Karen stood abruptly. "This is a circus. He's making it up to discredit me. I've served this community for 10 years. Jake cut her off. "Karen, you didn't just overstep your authority. You abused it. You tried to burn me out, destroy private property, falsify legal documents, and intimidate anyone who questioned. You." Click. A final slide. An email from the county's legal department confirming the forged documents and that an official criminal investigation had begun. Jake took a breath. "And as of this morning, a restraining order has been filed. Karen Stevenson is hereby barred from HOA leadership, from approaching my property, and from interacting with any community legal affairs pending the county investigation." Karen's face twisted. "You can't do this. You're just a homeowner," Jake smiled. "I'm not just a homeowner. I'm the landholder, the sheriff. And thanks to a clause in the original property charter," he held up a gold-embossed page, "this land you've spent years trying to control, it predates the HOA by 3 decades. What's more, it includes a dormant clause that grants protective oversight powers to the current law enforcement official residing on the parcel." June Marks, sitting quietly near the front, raised her hand. "I can confirm. I helped Jake draft the countersuit, and he now holds protective jurisdiction, not just over his property, but over any HOA enforcement action in Willow Creek that violates grandfathered land rights." Dead silence. Jake stepped closer to Karen. "You tried to erase me. You forgot. I'm not just a neighbor. I am the law here. And now you're the one who's going to be erased. From power, from the board, maybe even from this neighborhood." Karen backed away, stumbling, pale. She turned, but no one moved to help her. The community she'd ruled through fear had finally stopped fearing her. Later that night, Jake raised the flag again. This time it flew higher, and as the wind snapped, the stars and stripes to life under the dark sky. Jake looked out over Willow Creek, not as a sheriff or a landowner, but as a man who reminded them all that justice still had roots deeper than any HOA.